We live in a time where control is treated like a survival skill. We are told to plan everything, optimize everything, predict everything. If something doesn't work, we are taught to push harder. If progress slows down, we assume we are doing something wrong. If life resists, we try to overpower it. And slowly, without noticing, effort turns into tension. This tension is rarely questioned. In fact, it is praised. Stress becomes proof of commitment. Anxiety becomes a sign of ambition. Burnout is worn like a badge of honor, but there is a quiet problem hiding underneath all of this. The more tightly you try to control life, the less cooperative it becomes. Opportunities feel blocked, people become distant, timing feels hostile, even success, when it arrives, feels hollow and fragile. This is not because life is cruel, it is because rigidity breaks flow. The ancient Stoics understood this long before modern psychology had words for it. They did not believe that life should be forced into submission. They believed it should be understood, navigated, and aligned with. No one embodied this more clearly than Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was not a monk or a retreat philosopher. He was the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, ruling during war, plague, political betrayal, and constant instability. If anyone had a reason to demand control, it was him. And yet, in his private writings, never meant for public praise, he returned again and again to a single discipline, letting go of what he could not command. He wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This sentence is often quoted, but rarely understood. Marcus was not saying effort doesn't matter. He was saying effort placed in the wrong location becomes self-destructive. Most people try to control outcomes. The Stoics trained themselves to control orientation. That difference changes everything. There is a powerful illusion most people live inside. The belief that if they worry enough, push enough, or obsess enough, they can secure certainty. But certainty is not created through pressure. It is created through clarity, and clarity disappears the moment fear takes the wheel. When you grip a goal too tightly, your nervous system interprets that goal as a threat. Your thinking narrows, your perception distorts, you stop seeing alternatives. This is why desperation makes people say the wrong thing, choose the wrong timing, and sabotage good opportunities without realizing it. Marcus Aurelius watched this pattern constantly in others: generals rushing battles, politicians clinging to image, citizens panicking at uncertainty. He trained himself to do the opposite. Not by becoming passive, but by refusing to confuse urgency with importance. One of the most radical Stoic ideas is this: wanting something does not require tension. Modern culture teaches the opposite. It says that if you relax, you don't care enough. If you're calm, you must not be hungry. If you're peaceful, you're falling behind. The Stoics saw that as psychological immaturity. They understood that there is a clean form of desire and a distorted form of desire. Clean desire moves forward without panic. Distorted desire clings, demands, and tightens. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that when the mind becomes agitated by external things, it is not the situation that has power, but his interpretation of it. This is crucial. The moment your inner state depends on an outcome, you have already lost leverage. You may still succeed externally, but internally you have placed yourself in a position of weakness. The Stoics called this slavery. Not slavery to people, but slavery to conditions. And they believed a free person was someone whose peace was not hostage to results. This does not mean lowering standards. It means relocating stability. When your stability comes from within, effort becomes intelligent. When stability depends on outcomes, effort becomes frantic. Marcus Aurelius lived in constant uncertainty. He had no guarantee of victory, health, or loyalty. So he trained his mind to operate from what was in his control, his judgments, his values, and his actions in the present moment. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Not because the future didn't matter, but because the present was the only place where agency existed. Most people live mentally in a future that has not arrived yet. They negotiate with imagined scenarios. They suffer over predictions. They rehearse failure before it happens. The Stoics saw this as wasted life energy. Presence was not meditation for them, it was tactical. When attention is anchored in the present, decisions become cleaner. You respond instead of react. You notice instead of assume. You act without unnecessary friction. This is why people who are calm under pressure often seem lucky. They aren't lucky. They are available. They are not mentally elsewhere when opportunity passes by. Marcus Aurelius understood that control over life is an illusion, but control over response is not. And the irony is this: when you stop trying to dominate life, life becomes easier to work with. Water does not fight obstacles. It adjusts, flows, persists, and reshapes the environment over time. The Stoics admired this quality deeply. Not aggression, not force, adaptability without collapse. Marcus faced loss after loss, pressure after pressure, and yet his writings are not filled with bitterness. They are filled with reminders to himself to loosen his grip. Not because he gave up, but because he understood that tension blinds judgment. There is a quiet strength in someone who can say, "I will do what is mine to do, and I will release what is not." That sentence alone dissolves anxiety. Most people exhaust themselves trying to control timing, perception, and outcomes simultaneously. The Stoics separated these domains. You act with discipline, you think with clarity, you release the rest. This is not spiritual surrender, it is psychological efficiency, and it is where real power begins. When you stop forcing life, you stop interfering with it, and that is where movement quietly returns. Most people believe their biggest problem is uncertainty. They want clarity about the future. They want guarantees. They want reassurance that what they're doing will work out. But the Stoics understood something uncomfortable. Uncertainty is not the problem. Distraction is. When the mind is scattered across past regrets and future fears, it loses its ability to deal with what is actually happening. And when that happens, life starts to feel hostile, confusing, and resistant. Not because it is, but because the mind is no longer positioned to meet it properly. Marcus Aurelius wrote repeatedly about this struggle. His world was unstable by any standard. Wars were constant. Disease was widespread. Loyalty was fragile, yet instead of demanding certainty, he trained himself to remain present. He reminded himself that anxiety about the future was a misuse of imagination. That suffering ahead of time did not prepare him, it weakened him. Presence, for the Stoics, was not a wellness practice. It was a discipline of survival. When attention leaves the present moment, judgment deteriorates. Decisions become reactive instead of deliberate. You stop seeing reality as it is and start seeing it through fear, memory, and projection. This is when resistance begins to appear everywhere. People seem difficult. Timing feels wrong. Progress feels blocked. But often, resistance is not coming from life. It is coming from misalignment between attention and reality. Marcus Aurelius warned himself against this constantly. He wrote that if you are distressed by anything external, it is not the event itself that troubles you, but your judgment about it. And this judgment, he reminded himself, can be revoked. That idea is quiet but radical. It means that resistance is not something you are given, it is something you add. Most people meet obstacles with emotional tension first, thought second, and action last. The Stoics reversed that order. They trained themselves to see clearly before reacting, to pause before labeling something as bad, to ask what a situation actually requires instead of what the ego demands. This is where one of the most misunderstood Stoic ideas comes in. What stands in the way becomes the way. This was not a motivational slogan. It was a practical observation. Resistance is information. It reveals where your assumptions are wrong, where your timing is off, where your expectations are unrealistic. When resistance appears and you immediately fight it, you miss what it is trying to teach you. When you accept it without resentment, you gain leverage. Marcus Aurelius faced repeated setbacks that would have broken most people. Entire campaigns failed. Trusted allies betrayed him. His own health declined while responsibility increased. And yet he did not interpret resistance as a sign to collapse or panic. He interpreted it as material. Material for judgment, material for discipline, material for character. This is a crucial distinction. Most people want resistance to disappear so they can feel comfortable again. The Stoics wanted resistance to refine them so they could act better. That is why Stoic calm is often mistaken for indifference. It is not indifference. It is emotional restraint in service of clarity. Presence plays a key role here. When you are present, resistance does not feel overwhelming. It feels specific. It becomes something you can work with. When you are not present, resistance feels global. Everything feels wrong. You don't know where to start. This is why scattered minds experience life as chaotic, while grounded minds experience the same life as manageable. Marcus Aurelius trained presence through constant reminders, not affirmations, reminders. He reminded himself where he was, what was required of him now, what was irrelevant noise. He wrote that you should not let the future trouble you, for you will meet it, if you must, with the same weapons of reason you use today. That sentence alone dismantles anxiety. It reframes the future not as a threat, but as a moment you will handle when it arrives, using clarity you already possess. The Stoics did not try to escape discomfort. They tried to remove unnecessary suffering. And most suffering, they observed, comes from mental time travel. The mind leaves the present. Fear fills the gap. Resistance multiplies. When attention returns to the present, resistance often shrinks. Not because the obstacle vanishes, but because you are no longer fighting a phantom version of it. This is why presence creates momentum. You stop negotiating with imagined futures. You stop replaying old mistakes. You stop exhausting yourself with scenarios that do not exist. You deal with what is in front of you, and life responds to that. Another Stoic insight that ties directly into resistance is this: reality does not argue with you, but it will not bend either. When your expectations collide with reality, one of them must adjust. Reality never does. Marcus Aurelius accepted this without bitterness. He trained himself to say, "This is what the situation is. Now what is the correct response? Not why is this happening to me? Not this shouldn't be happening. Not this ruins everything." Those reactions feel human, but they also delay resolution. The Stoics believed that resistance becomes unbearable only when ego insists that things should be different than they are. Remove that insistence, and resistance becomes manageable, even useful. This does not mean you stop acting. It means you stop fighting reality while acting. There is a subtle but important difference. When you resist resistance, you create friction inside yourself. When you accept resistance, you create space to navigate it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that nature has no evil intentions toward you. Events unfold according to laws larger than personal preference. Your task is not to complain about them, but to respond with reason. This worldview does something powerful to the nervous system. It calms it. And a calm nervous system sees options that a panicked one cannot. This is why Stoic presence feels almost magnetic. People trust someone who is not mentally scattered. Opportunities arise for those who are paying attention. Presence is not about being slow, it is about being precise. Resistance is not a punishment, it is feedback. And when the mind stops fleeing the present moment, that feedback becomes intelligible. Marcus Aurelius did not seek ease. He sought alignment, and alignment reduced resistance without force. When you stop fighting the moment you are in, the moment stops fighting you. That is not philosophy. That is psychological reality, and it is the foundation for everything that comes next. Most people believe their life is shaped by circumstances. Their mood depends on how others treat them. Their confidence rises and falls with success or failure. Their sense of peace changes with money, recognition, or approval. The Stoics saw this as the most dangerous form of dependence. Not dependence on people, dependence on externals. Marcus Aurelius understood this threat intimately. As emperor, he lived under constant evaluation. Every decision was judged, every mistake amplified, every weakness exploited. If his emotional state depended on circumstances, he would have collapsed under the weight of his position. Instead, he trained himself in something rare: inner authority. Inner authority is not control over life. It is control over interpretation. Marcus reminded himself that events do not enter the mind with meaning attached. Meaning is assigned, and whatever is assigned can be questioned. This is where emotional sovereignty begins. Most people experience emotions as commands. Anger tells them to react. Fear tells them to retreat. Desire tells them to chase. The Stoics rejected this model completely. They believed emotions were signals, not leaders. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind becomes colored by the quality of its thoughts. If you allow impressions to rush in unchecked, your emotional life becomes chaotic. But if you pause and examine impressions before accepting them, stability emerges. This pause is everything. Between stimulus and reaction lies freedom. Most people never enter that space. They react instantly. They justify afterward. The Stoics did the opposite. They felt emotion fully, but they refused to let it decide their behavior. This is often misunderstood as emotional suppression. It is not. Emotional sovereignty does not mean denying anger, fear, or sadness. It means refusing to surrender direction to them. Marcus Aurelius experienced grief, frustration, and exhaustion. His writings are not emotionally flat. They are disciplined. He allowed emotion to exist without allowing it to rule. This distinction matters. When emotions drive behavior, life becomes volatile. When emotions inform behavior, life becomes coherent. Think about how many decisions people regret because they were made in emotional urgency. Words spoken that cannot be taken back. Actions taken too early. Opportunities lost due to fear or pride. The Stoics trained themselves to slow the moment down internally, even when external pressure was intense. Marcus reminded himself that nothing has the power to disturb the soul unless it is allowed entry. This was not arrogance. It was responsibility. Responsibility for the inner world. Most people unconsciously outsource this responsibility. They say, "That made me angry. They ruined my mood. This situation destroyed my peace." The Stoics heard those statements as admissions of surrender. Marcus would have rephrased them quietly in his own mind. "I allowed this impression to disturb me." That reframe restores agency. Once agency returns, choice returns. And choice is where power lives. Another aspect of inner authority is refusing to measure yourself by external validation. Marcus Aurelius warned himself repeatedly against living for applause. He knew public opinion was unstable and shallow. If your sense of worth depends on recognition, you will constantly adjust yourself to be palatable. You will hide truth, you will dilute conviction, and over time you will feel internally divided. Division weakens the mind. The Stoics valued integrity because it simplified life. When thought, speech, and action align, energy stops leaking. Decisions become cleaner. You stop second-guessing yourself constantly. Marcus wrote that it is possible to live well even in a palace if one remembers what truly belongs to him. His character, his reasoning, his choices, everything else could be taken. This perspective created emotional resilience without emotional numbness. Inner authority also changes how you relate to success. When you do not need success to feel whole, you stop sabotaging it. When failure does not threaten identity, you recover faster. When praise does not inflate ego, judgment stays clear. People often assume that strong emotions fuel achievement. The Stoics observed the opposite. Clear emotions fuel endurance. Unstable emotions exhaust willpower. Marcus Aurelius governed through fatigue, illness, and crisis precisely because he did not let his emotional state dictate his responsibilities. He wrote that you should ask of every impression, "Is this within my control?" If not, release it. This practice prevents internal overload. Modern life overwhelms people not because it is complex, but because they try to emotionally manage everything at once. The Stoics compartmentalized wisely. They acted where action was possible. They accepted where it was not. They conserved energy. Emotional sovereignty also changes how you experience hardship. When difficulty arises, most people merge with the emotion it triggers. They become the fear. They become the anger. They become the frustration. The Stoics observed emotions instead of fusing with them. Marcus Aurelius treated emotion as weather passing through the mind. Felt fully, acknowledged honestly, but not allowed to define the landscape. This distance creates strength, not coldness, clarity, and clarity attracts trust. People feel safe around someone who is not emotionally erratic. Opportunities appear for those who do not overreact. Inner authority is quietly magnetic. You stop begging for reassurance. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop handing your peace to circumstances. This does not make you passive. It makes you durable. Marcus Aurelius did not control the world. He controlled his participation in it, and that control was enough. When you reclaim emotional sovereignty, life stops feeling like something that happens to you. It becomes something you engage with deliberately. And from that place, power becomes calm, stable, and sustainable. There comes a point where effort stops being the problem. Many people reach a stage in life where they have worked hard, learned discipline, and built competence, yet something still feels blocked. Progress exists, but satisfaction doesn't. Movement happens, but peace doesn't follow. The Stoics believed this moment was not a failure, it was a signal that the struggle was no longer external, it had become internal. One of the most destabilizing ideas in modern culture is the belief that more will finally resolve the feeling of incompleteness. More success, more recognition, more certainty, more proof. The Stoics dismantled this illusion completely. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire that stretched across continents, yet he warned himself against the quiet poverty of endless wanting. He reminded himself that the mind can turn abundance into misery if it refuses to recognize sufficiency. The problem is not that people want to grow. The problem is that they postpone peace until growth is complete. The Stoics called this a mistake of judgment. Enough is not a number, it is not a milestone, it is not a finish line. Enough is a decision. When you recognize that you already possess what is necessary to live with dignity, reason, choice, integrity, the endless chase loses its grip. This does not kill ambition, it cleans it. When ambition is driven by lack, it feels urgent and brittle. When ambition is driven by sufficiency, it feels steady and precise. Marcus Aurelius understood that a person who feels internally complete is harder to manipulate, harder to rush, and harder to destabilize. From that place, effort becomes selective. You stop chasing what does not belong to you. You stop proving what does not need proof. This naturally leads to authenticity. Inauthentic living is one of the greatest sources of internal resistance. When a person constantly adjusts themselves to be accepted, approved, or admired, the mind fractures. Thought goes one way, action goes another. The Stoics saw this fracture as dangerous. Marcus warned himself not to live as if he were performing for others. He believed that peace depended on agreement between inner values and outward behavior. When those align, friction disappears. Authenticity is not rebellion. It is coherence. When you act from who you actually are, not who you are trying to be, energy stops leaking. Decisions feel lighter. Regret diminishes. Life responds differently to coherence. People trust it. Opportunities recognize it. Conflict reduces around it. This is not mystical. It is psychological. The mind functions best when it is not divided. Marcus Aurelius did not seek admiration. He sought consistency. He wanted his actions to match his principles even when no one was watching. That kind of integrity creates a quiet gravity. It removes the need to impress. It removes the need to force outcomes. It removes the fear of being misunderstood. And when those needs fall away, alignment replaces effort. The final Stoic insight that ties everything together is time. Most people suffer not because things are wrong, but because they are early, or because they are late, or because reality refuses to match expectation. Impatience is often disguised as ambition. Marcus Aurelius accepted time as something larger than personal desire, not in resignation but in humility. He believed the universe operated according to reason, even when human understanding was limited. He did not demand that events unfold on his schedule. He prepared himself to meet them when they arrived. This is what modern language often calls divine timing, but stripped of superstition, it is simply respect for complexity. Some things require preparation you cannot see yet. Some conditions need to align beyond your control. Some delays protect you from outcomes you are not ready to carry. The Stoics trusted this without becoming passive. They acted decisively where action belonged to them. They released the rest without resentment. This balance is rare. Most people either force everything or surrender everything. The Stoics did neither. They stood in the middle. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man should accept whatever comes woven into the pattern of his destiny and love the people and circumstances fate places around him. This was not sentimentality, it was realism. Fighting time exhausts the mind, working with time strengthens it. When you stop demanding that life hurry, you start noticing what it is already offering. This is where the series resolves. Letting go does not mean withdrawing from life. It means removing the tension that distorts your participation in it. Detached desire removes desperation. Presence removes distraction. Acceptance of resistance removes friction. Inner authority removes emotional instability. The sense of enough removes scarcity. Authenticity removes division. Trust in time removes panic. What remains is clarity, and clarity is quietly powerful. Marcus Aurelius did not build his strength by chasing peace. He built peace by aligning his mind with reality. From that alignment, strength followed naturally. When you stop forcing life, you stop blocking it. And when resistance fades, movement returns, not dramatically, not loudly, but reliably. This is the Stoic path, not control over the world, but mastery of participation within it. And that is enough.